All right. Good afternoon. My name is John Tierpak, Director of the Unemployment Law Project. Unemployment Law Project is a statewide nonprofit legal services office that advises and represents people with unemployment claim issues for Washington state claims. We have offices in Seattle and Spokane, and we have represented thousands of people over the years in unemployment hearings. We are currently very busy, even though the pandemic is being addressed with the vaccinations and things that seem to be looking up. Our offices are still receiving hundreds of calls per day because not only are there some new claims for unemployment and ongoing problems from last year, there are many overpayments involved with claims from the previous year. Very often people who were on the wrong program, things of that nature. So if you've been trying to call our office and have trouble getting through, just please be patient, leave a detailed message. But the crisis is going on in terms of numbers of calls. I would like to announce just that next week is the Memorial Day holiday. So we will not have our regular weekly webinar, and we will return the following week, which would be Monday, June 7th. So I would like to introduce Ann Paxton, the ULP Policy Director, who will give us some latest news and updates, and then we will answer some questions that are in the Q&A, and we have some other questions that others have sent us by email. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to our weekly webinar. We have a lot of news this week, and many of you may have already read about the arrest of a Nigerian official who's associated with the infamous estimated $600 million fraud against Washington's employment security system last year. The scam was called Scattered Canary. Apparently this Nigerian was an official of the government in Nigeria, and they're now negotiating the terms of his release on bail, which I hope they're going to be harsh, because I don't think $300,000 is going to cover, is going to ensure that this person shows up for trial. But I think they have it under control. Let's hope so. But the interesting thing is, there has been in the meantime a surge in claims at the Employment Security Department, which there were some fears that this was related to fraud, but they now think that it may have been attempts at fraud. There was a spike in early May in the number of applications for benefits, and some of them apparently it looked like they were using stolen Social Security numbers and other personal data to file fake claims. This is a much smaller fraud than last year, and this year the Employment Security Department believes that they have it under much better control because they have a lot of security measures in place. The remarkable thing was this was a 60% jump in the beginning of May over the prior week. So it was very unexpected and at first unexplained, but I think this is what the reason was. There's the president of the Identity Theft Resource Center has said unemployment fraud was such a lucrative cash cow for the thieves that they're not going to stop trying. This all happened, by the way, as unemployment in the country was dropping. It fell 7.1% to 440,000 last week. So that shows or may indicate that some of the flags that are showing up in the new security processes are helping. According to the IT director according to the security director at ESD, there were 76% of the claims that were filed in early May were flagged as unusual. One of the things that's happening is people, I believe this happened with the Nigerian who was arrested. They had several versions of Gmail addresses that were under the same Gmail account, and they could do this by minute variations in the address, and they would still get the money in many cases would get directed to the same email address, but it was all fraudulent. But there's been some new tactics as well this year. And so it's always a challenge for the Employment Security Department to stay one step ahead of the people, the criminals. The regions that are generating the most fraudulent claims are Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, but there's several also coming from Washington State, although many of them are masking their locations. One comment to make about the current possible wave of fraud is that the stakes are slightly smaller this year, because if you remember last year, you could get benefits fairly easily extending over several weeks, and including the $600 extra payment from the PUC program. This is not available. This sort of back payment is not available at the same level. At that time, you could get $10,000 in one check. Now you're likely to be limited to something more like $1,100. So what is the wait time, though, for people who are authentic claimants and legitimately should be getting benefits? ESD is saying last week that approximately 10,000 claimants were not receiving benefits and were waiting for ESD to resolve a question with their claim during the prior week. And that's a very big decrease from December, when they had 25,000 claimants waiting for resolution. Still, the average time to resolve these issues, and those are the ones that are going into the process known as adjudication, was 9.7 weeks. So that's still the same length of time that it took in December. In the meantime, the number of calls to ESD has been on the rise. They got a 20% increase in April. Average wait times went up 9% to more than 41 minutes in April, and the number of times callers were hung up on did fall, but there was a very big increase in the number who received high call volume messages, which were basically call back later. So they say if you get 314,000 calls of those high volume calls in April, we all know that what that leads to is people just repeatedly calling back. So they're very distorted numbers in a way. It's important to keep that in mind. And there's been a lot of publicity about the number of states. Right now, as of the last I checked, it was 22 states, most states that did not vote for Biden, that have made early cutoffs of unemployment benefits and so it's getting to be up to close to half of the states that are deciding to do this on the sort of narrative that people are not going back to work because of the generous benefits that they're receiving. And this has really been extremely unfortunate, because there is so much evidence that is absolutely not true. Right now, there are 40% more unemployed workers than there are job openings. So more than 80% of unemployed workers, then there are more than 80% more unemployed workers in the entertainment and restaurant industry than their leisure and hospitality than there are jobs. So this is a very weird response to make, to cut off benefits to people that are actually benefiting each state because they go into the economy to the tune of billions of dollars, in order to induce people to go back to work, when frankly they have a lot of reasons why they can't go back to work. And one is their jobs may not be available. Even if you had exactly the same number of jobs available as you did people, it's very unlikely that there's going to be a close match to even half of those jobs and the qualifications of the people who are looking for work. Maybe the jobs don't even have living wages and benefits, or they're unsafe. That has not been given enough attention. The fact that people are unwilling in many cases to go back to jobs where they might have a very high risk of getting COVID. Or, very important, and this largely affects women, is the number of workers who have caregiving responsibilities, with the child care centers having radically downsized and schools in many cases still being closed. 32%, almost a third of women last year were pushed from ages 25 to 34 were pushed out of the labor force because of many times because of these child care and family care issues. So recovery is imminent, it's in progress, but it has not happened, and it certainly has not happened at the level of the economic recovery that is needed. To really put people back to work on a comprehensive basis. It's important to remember last in December when the PUC extra $600 and other benefits were and subsequent benefits were cut off. In January, there was about a loss to the economy of $17.6 billion in benefits. That was 38% of less than workers were due to receive. So that was the kind of impact that this shrinking benefit pile administration has had upon workers and is continuing to have. So the Century Foundation, or that is, they're associated with the National Employment Law Project. They say because of this early cutoffs of benefits in other states, not Washington State, about 3.5 million people stand to lose their jobless aid, and that's going to have a severe impact. And I should stress that this is not just people who are getting. This is just not the PUC benefit, which is now $300 extra. This also includes PUA. It includes the extension of benefits to people that were gig workers or self-employed or people that were working part-time. All of those people will be cut off of benefits. So it's a very sweeping set of decisions that are being made on very, very shaky grounds. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about information technology because that's been in the news so much. There was a big story in Politico last week that was very interesting. It started out with a quotation by Stephen Wandner, who happens to be an expert on unemployment insurance, has written books about it, and is married to a Washingtonian in 2017, an attorney. His wife was an attorney, and she was applying for unemployment benefits. And so here we have an attorney and an expert on UI sitting down to apply, and they found that the English language application was almost incomprehensible. The questions, this expert said, were in English, but they may as well have been in Latin. So a lot of you will sympathize with this experience, since it's very similar to what most people have had. The questions are confusing. They're worded strangely. A lot of times the information technology system has turned the application process into something that is one size fits all, which means one size fits almost none. So that is a very common experience. And they found themselves saying, with some questions, what are they talking about? So there's getting to be a strong consensus that the IT system is a big problem, but maybe not for the right reasons, which I want to explain a little bit. The IT system it's legitimately accused of being antiquated. You know, a lot of the programs were written in the 50s, and back when people used an antiquated language called COBOL, which actually happens to really still be functioning in a lot of contexts in the federal government, and sort of cranking away in its very humble way. And I can show you examples of some of the determination notices that went out to claimants before a new IT system came in, and some of the ones that you're familiar with that are coming out now under the IT system, which in Washington State came in 2017. And I will be very interested to see if you think the old notices are worse than the new ones, because they're much clearer, they're much more straightforward, and the claimants end up having fewer questions about what exactly is happening with their claim. In California, they're doing an extremely large project to fix their system, and again, installing new computer servers, and updating the coding language. And at the federal level, there's also a very strong effort in a bill initiated by Representative Wyden from Oregon to overhaul the National Unemployment Program. They're trying to figure out a way to get a comprehensive IT system that the states can draw upon in their own states in a sort of modular way. This could be problematic. I'm not sure that it's going to address sort of the major problems that people have been experiencing. They can't get any human help, I would say, would be the number one problem that people in Washington State have mentioned, and probably in most states. However, the fact is that there have been very few reforms of the IT system or the entire federal/state system since the 1930s. And there is, it is time, the time is overdue to get some reforms put in. I will mention in the last recession, though, the Obama administration made a lot of increases in assistance to states for administering unemployment benefits hinge upon their installation of new IT systems, but that didn't always actually help. There was a great quote from Georgia, the labor commissioner in Georgia recently said, in Georgia, they have their own IT staff and programmers, and he had veteran workers who had to be trained on an entirely new system there. He said when the new benefit system came in under the CARES Act last year, Congress made it as difficult as humanly possible. They didn't provide us with any software. They didn't provide us with any infrastructure. Instead, they said, here's some money, y'all go figure it out. And then they gave the public the expectations that the benefits were going to happen immediately. So just some context for what happened last year. Was a very ambitious program, and in many ways very generous program to get benefits out there as quickly as possible, but a lot of logistical difficulties along the way. Some reforms that are happening, you know, we've been following closely the reforms that are happening in Washington State, where we did get several claims processing improvement measures approved by the legislature in a bill that was just signed by Governor Inslee. In some other states, in Virginia, they signed a bill that would guarantee if a worker is deemed initially eligible for benefits, they won't be cut off until their case has been decided. How I wish we had that here. And another measure in New Jersey would appropriate money for legislative districts to hire an unemployment claims handler to deal with high call volumes during the pandemic. So there are some interesting solutions being talked about and even adopted in some other states. Not that Washington has a very good record compared to a lot of states, but these are some things that we could consider using here. And one thing they're talking about in California is a navigator system. Their current budget is proposing $11.4 million to hire $4 million to hire navigators. And what they would do would be help guide people when they're filing benefit claims, especially when they lack technology to use the online systems. And the job center offices, those are the work source offices in Washington State. Those have been largely closed during the pandemic. They would be offering one-stop shops for workforce services. But California isn't ahead of us on everything. They don't have direct deposit, which is something that's been really helpful to claimants here in Washington. So that's something they're going to be installing. Wanted to mention there was a February story that interviewed had input from a whistleblower who worked at the Employment Security Department for 6 months last year, and really gave some very shocking information about what goes on there. Now, this is definitely the testimony of one person, but this person has also been testifying as a declarant in some lawsuits against the department, and has described the ESD as a sort of assembly line. Those on specialized phone lines acting as kind of a cogs in a giant machine. In the main customer service line, they were told they could only certify one yes or no questions related to a certain topic. That basically they were turned into robotic phone answers rather than humans who could explain things. Even though they had the knowledge and experience to explain things, the emphasis was on speed, getting through the calls as fast as possible. They weren't allowed to tell people, oh, it looks like you might qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance, as opposed to regular UI. They could not send somebody to that extension. And they said they had lots of times when they knew how to resolve an issue, but they were prevented from doing it. In one case, reprimanded, this whistleblower said she was reprimanded if she took time after a call to record the details of the person's claim. I usually would need time between calls to make notes, so there would be good notes for the next person who would be picking up the case. And I was told, no, you get 5 seconds in between calls. Now, admittedly, there was an extreme overload on the system last year, but there were frequent changes in the rules, frequent changes in procedures, all kinds of confusion. But this is just something that we should keep in mind that can happen when a system is too rigid or has other problems that are preventing it from really performing something that's needed, which is actually helping people who may not be able to negotiate the system as it is. Now, in the new bill that was just passed, there is a requirement that there be dedicated phone service for people that are unfamiliar with computers or have computer literacy issues or not access to computers, among other kind of consumer protection issues. So that is something that we can look forward to, I believe. And I wanted to just close with this very interesting photograph from the 1930s in San Francisco. And this is a photograph by Dorothea Lange, who's a famous photographer from that era. Took many wonderful photographs of the impact of the Depression. This is an application process for benefits. And I think it sums up something that we aren't familiar with today, but really shows that possibly government can fulfill a role here of actually assisting people who need help when they're in financial need and are lacking a job. So it's kind of a touching picture. That's the reaction of a lot of people. And that's the news.
Thanks, Anne. Yes, and up until, the recent decades, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, people could apply in person for unemployment benefits at unemployment offices. It's not that the system was great back then. Of course, there were many problems with the system, but there was more personal contact. And I think the system did evolve to become more complicated with more checks and balances. For example, during regular times with the job search requirement, people were not required to keep a log of their job searches. And that went on for decades of the program. So it became maybe a political issue in the 80s when there was concern that there were too many people cheating the system or something like that. But it's created more bureaucracy and has drained off resources that should be helping people or processing claims have been put into like overpayment collections or checking job search logs. And just one correction on the previous slide, it's Representative Wyden, W-Y-D-N from Oregon, but we see why you're thinking Wyden Biden. Maybe Biden will pick Wyden to be his running mate. And next time it'll be a Wyden Biden ticket, or Biden. Anyway, one thing before we get to questions, we have a few questions coming up, is that there's a lot of confusion over the terminology, and I think it's worth for everyone to kind of go over what is PUA, what is PUEC. So, because I think these terms often get misused or interchangeable. So what is the term for the supplement? If you're getting unemployment, whether it's regular unemployment or pandemic, up until last July, it was $600 and then it became $300. What is that program called of the supplemental amount?
Okay, so we've always called that PUC, Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. Now at ESD, they call it the federal PUC, or for short, FPUC, which I cannot get my head around, but that is the way they refer to it there. But that is now $300. It was lapsed for several months after it ended last July 31st. But that was a very big attraction for the fraudsters because they could get very fat lump sums of benefits for short period for a few months, and that caused a lot of drain.
And what is the pandemic unemployment benefit for people who don't fit into regular benefits? For example, if you're an independent contractor or don't have enough hours.
Right. So
what is that?
Independent contractors, people that don't have a work history, even. You didn't even have to have a work history to get benefits. That they were eligible for the federal alternative, which was PUA. At ESD, that was known as PUA. I could also not get my head around that either. I'll just continue saying PUA. But that's still in place. This is unfortunately, though, a very big component of the benefits that are going out right now that the governors in 22 plus states have decided to cut off, along with PUC and the other benefits.
So, so if you're getting the PUA, let's say you were an Uber driver, or let's say self-employed, you had an internet business, or maybe you were a consultant, self-employed, and you're getting the PUA. Do you also get the FPUC attached to that?
Yes, if you're getting regular benefits, regular state benefits, that's always here before and after the pandemic, you can get the add-on. You will get the add-on automatically. Now it's $300. If you're getting PUA, you will get the add-on, $300.
Now, here's the last one. What is PEUC?
Ah, so PEUC is available for people that were getting regular benefits, but their benefits were exhausted. So usually after 26 weeks, your regular benefits are exhausted in Washington State. In some states, it's down to only 10 weeks. But after 26 weeks under the federal program, you can get the PEUC, Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And that will continue your benefits for several weeks. And I'm not sure how many they are right now, usually 15 to 20, 25 extra weeks after you've exhausted regular benefits.
Okay.
Not PUA. It does not affect PUA though. If you're on PUA, you have to have, there's other things that they have to do with your claim to extend your benefits.
All right, thank you. So just sort of for everyone, if you're talking to people and they're throwing out terms, they might be talking about something different than what you're thinking about. So it's something that's been hard in the last year because I'll be talking to people and they'll say I'm being denied something, and they'll say something, but then when I get more information, it turns out it's something else, and it can be confusing. I have a question from someone wanting to know, what should I write in my appeal letter? And it's a very good question, because appeal could mean different things. So I will address both, what I think of as both of the most common possibilities. When you apply for benefits and you get a letter of denial, it says you have a right to an appeal. That's to request a hearing. So the case went through some kind of adjudication. Probably took a long time, but there's some sort of decision against you. And it says you have right to appeal, and there's a 30-day deadline. It's important to read that closely. To request a hearing, it doesn't require, any kind of legal expertise or complicated, argument or citations. It's basically, I disagree with the decision, maybe state in a few sentences or paragraph the reason why, like, I don't believe I should have to pay the money back, or I believe I quit for good cause for this reason. Something brief like that, but make sure to say I want a hearing, so that when they receive it, they're clear that it's a hearing that's being requested. Employment Security gets so much correspondence, so many people. Sometimes people will send ESD a letter which is giving them information, and because the system is not personalized, they don't know what to do with it. Like, is this a response to a request for information, or is this a request for hearing? So it's very good to be plain and simple. I disagree with the letter. You can give the date of the letter, even the number of the letter. I want a hearing with the judge, or I want a hearing. Make that very clear and simple and upfront. It's probably not helpful to write, like some people feel, they want to write, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of information. It's often very confusing, because the person reading this is trying to figure out, what is this about? What am I supposed to do with this? So it's good to put that I want a hearing up front in the first paragraph and make it clear and simple. And also follow the instructions carefully about what information they're asking, like your Social Security. And if you're submitting it in writing by fax or mail, make sure there's a written signature on it. Now, if it's an appeal of a hearing you've already had, that's called a petition for review, and that can be submitted online through the portal or by US mail, not by fax or email. And that's a case where you've already had a hearing, and that can be up to 5 pages long, and you can go into much more detail as to why you believe the judge was incorrect. Maybe they got the facts wrong, maybe they misinterpreted the law from your point of view, or maybe we're not aware of rules that you might be aware of. Then that's what you want to do, and you want to call that petition for review and make sure it goes to the right place, we see a lot where people unfortunately will send correspondence to the wrong addresses, and then it doesn't get processed, and then if they have to do it again, it's late, and then if it's late, that's a problem. So it's important to read the notice carefully, and make sure it's sent to the right address if it's by mail, or or if you're using the online portal, make sure it's the right thing. Now, people ask, if I do a petition for review, will I get a new hearing? In most cases, no. In most cases, they just review the recording of the hearing and then make another decision either for you or against you. But there are some cases, whether it be bad audio or whether the judge feels there was something wrong with the hearing that needs to have more information or something, it may be sent back for a new hearing there. So let's see, next question.
John, just I want to add
sure.
one thing.
Sure, please.
I agree with you. It's very, on a PFR, you do have to go into detail, although you're limited to 5 pages. If you go over 5 pages, they won't read the rest, anything after 5. But when you're applying, when you're making your first appeal, that's going to for a hearing, and they ask you, why are you appealing? There is no need to go into detail. And in fact, it can backfire against you later. All you need to do is say you disagree with the decision and you wish to appeal and get a hearing. Because if you say more than that, there is a chance, not that it would always happen, but there is a chance during the hearing, the judge will note that you said something different in your request for an appeal than you said during the hearing. That could really count against you in some judge's view. And it's very unfortunate because I've seen the forms, the written forms have several lines to answer this question. Why do you want to appeal? You are not required to go into detail. So just throwing that in there, because it has been a very bad thing for a couple of claimants we've seen recently.
Well, also be aware that anything you write, the employer, if there's an employer involved, the employer will be reading it for the hearing, and they can use that information and get ready for it. There are some cases where an appeal, including information, might be helpful. There are some cases, and only some, where they might take the appeal letter and rather than send it to the hearing office, they may be able to fix something. And it's usually a case of something technical, like you know, if you were writing an appeal letter like this, I disagree with the letter dated, you know, December 2nd. It says I did not provide my identification. I did provide my identification on whatever date. I uploaded it to the portal. You know, I want a hearing with the judge. Now, that little bit of information, the person present at that claim might be able to look at it and see that it's there, because we've heard about these cases where somebody submits something and it just sits there. That could be resolved. So there are cases like that. We have a question about the job search. A person says, I've been looking for work anyway because I'm vaccinated and ready to go back, but I want to know when I should start writing down all of my job searches. So the job search was suspended last March of last year. And any word on that, or any updates on when the documentation of a job search will come into effect?
Sure. Right now, the expectation is that the suspension of job search is going through September, because it is in place by rule, as long as there's a public health emergency in the state, which will continue. It's possible the legislature could end the public health emergency, in which case the job search would be reinstated. So you just have to stay alert for any notices like that. That's pretty unlikely. We're kind of expecting, however, since the economy is reopening here, there's a chance that job search could be something that's actively enforced again very soon.
And I would like to add a few notes about the job search, because for most claimants, the job search of documenting 3 individual job contacts each week is required. And I'm talking during regular times. There are a couple other categories that come up on occasion. It's worth mentioning here. One is if you're in what's called a full referral union. And a full referral union is the kind of union where they send you out on jobs specifically. You're on this waiting list, and they will call you when your job comes up. And usually these unions are in the trades, electricians, pipe fitters, plumbers. There's these kind of unions where you're a member, you're active on this out of work list, you've paid your dues, you know, you're on. And so when your number comes up, you get sent out. A person who's in that situation, and again, not all, very few unions are full, what's called full referral. You don't have to do the 3 job searches. You can, it's your right to if you want to, but it can be tricky though, because if you're in the union and you don't want to accept non-union work, it can be messy if you're turning down non-union jobs that you never should have applied for to begin with. So beware of that. The other category is if you're on standby, and normal standby is for a few weeks, and that's a temporary layoff. Think of a company like Boeing where they need to shut down a particular project for a few weeks to get ready for the next project, or they finish the project and they say, you know, come back in 4 weeks. If you're officially on standby, again, you can't just say you're on standby. It's something the employer has to notify Employment Security Department about. A person on standby does not have to look for work. And then the other categories, if you're in an approved training program, commission approved training benefits, that participating in the training would replace the job search requirement.
Also, if you go to the ESD site, they will give you a lot of alternatives to actually calling or messaging an employer directly that will qualify as job search. That will qualify as part of your 3 job searches. That could be how to write a resume, a workshop on maybe how to go through an interview, other tips for applying for work. So there are a lot of alternatives now in addition to actual contacts with employers. But of course, those are probably among the more important. There are alternatives in terms of job search activities. So be sure and look at the website to get the lists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, jobs contacts can be a number of things, but it's important not to do the same place with the same job over and over, and there's no problem doing more if you will document at least 3. Most people are making more than 3 in a week, because if you're unemployed, you have lots of time and you want to get back to full-time work as quickly as possible. So we have a question from a substitute teacher. Usually when I file my claim, I haven't worked for the schools that week. I simply don't put anything and there's no problem. And I can file my claim. This week when I filed that I did not work, it said, you worked the previous week. Why wouldn't you claim for this week? Were you laid off? Of all the choices, laid off was the one that worked and allowed me to continue. Yeah, these systems are set up for the general public and don't really account for like certain on-call type of jobs like this. Let's see, of all the choices, laid off was the one that worked and allowed me to continue. If I hadn't chosen this, I would have not been able to file. I have not been laid off officially, but I did not work. So the term layoff, you could substitute the phrase lack of work. So you're not fired, you're not separated from the job, you're not like laid off permanently or indefinitely. There's just a lack of work that week, so that would work. Why is it not consistent with qualifications going forward? Is saying laid off correct wording? Yes, that is correct in this case, because you could see it as a temporary layoff for the day. I wish they had special categories for different professions that would be clearer. It would be easier, but I think if there's a lack of work or layoff, even if you're not, again, you haven't separated from the employer, you're still on their books, you're still in good standing, and you will be working for them again. I think that works well. The question goes on to say, as a substitute, will I continue to receive unemployment in the summer due to the pandemic? Good question. Substitute teachers as school employees are subject to rules about reasonable assurance, and that is in general, school employees, again, there's exceptions, I don't want to go into, but in general, a school employee is not going to get unemployment over the summer because that's considered a regular break. And even though I don't agree with this personally, that it applies to some employees that I don't think it should apply to, but it does. So the school will likely be sending out letters in May, well, it's already end of May, but May or June, saying that you have reasonable assurance of returning in the fall. Is there anything different about pandemic unemployment versus regular, if you were getting pandemic unemployment as opposed to regular employment, would the reasonable assurance rules still apply? Have you ever seen that?
I can't answer that across the board. I do know that a lot of case by case decisions are being made about eligibility for substitutes and for other teachers subject to reasonable assurance rules. So it would be something you'd have to look at the individual case to see what the eligibility would be.
And so people, even before the pandemic, would ask, I'm a substitute or other, I'm a school employee, I'm not sure. I hear some people get unemployment, some people don't. What should I do? Well, if you don't want to deal with the hassle of possibly being denied or paying back, I would say don't claim and just pick it up claiming in the fall when you go back to work, as far as a simple way to do it. If you want to file, if you're not sure, you can file, and there's nothing to worry about as long as you provide correct information. If you're unemployed in the summer, you're not working, and answer the questions, you're able and available to work, and there's no work for you, they will ask you, they'll probably send you a questionnaire about reasonable assurance and then make a decision. There could be an overpayment involved if they begin to give you benefits and then they later deny them. You can request a hearing to fight the overpayment, and the judge may or may not have you pay it back or not. Some people might, I've talked to some people who, when they claim unemployment, if they're not sure how it's going to go, they'll just put the money in a savings account if they can afford to do that, and then just pay it back later if it's found against them, and not fight it. So these are individual choices, and it's hard to predict how, in a case of a school employee, how the school district is going to fight it or not. What kind of, if they are in fact sending out reasonable assurance letters, and so it's hard to know. And then as far as PUA goes, I have wondered about this question, and I haven't seen it tested, because one of the qualifications of pandemic is a lack of childcare. So if you're happen to be a school employee and have a lack of childcare related to pandemic, that lack of childcare is probably will continue in the summer. So whether there's reasonable assurance or not. So it's hard to say, but it would appear to me that the person should qualify for pandemic, but these are things that haven't been tested in the sense that we haven't had hearings on these issues and seen like a pattern of results. And anything else to add about that?
No, it's very difficult to predict what will happen this summer. Conditions are changed, and there's some other questions up here about can we expect the same provisions for UI that we received last summer. This summer, no, I doubt it, because of the economy reopening, schools are reopening, conditions are different, so it's very hard to predict. Just have to, again, I do want to stress, I received 3 emails from people this week who had told, just please bite the bullet, get on the phone, you're going to take a stress pill, whatever it takes to get through. And they said they finally did get through, and they got resolution on their claim. So I can't stress enough that it is worth the time, if you have it, to call the phone lines at the claim center and ask these questions. They may be able to give you some information that would help.
And also too, another thing that people have trouble getting through, some people have had success contacting their state senator and state representatives, and if they get a friendly person on the staff, they might be able to do like an inquiry or something like that that has helped some people. And I'm talking state, not federal representatives and senators. Um, and there's a website, the Washington State Legislature has a website, leg.wa.gov, which you can find who your senator is and who your district is. So we have a couple more questions before we wrap up. This person says, I never signed up for e-services. I've been getting hard copies of everything, I guess, in the mail. Today I received a text message telling me to sign up for e-services to respond for more information. I will answer all of their requests for more information through the mail. Is this a scam? Well, excellent question, in that there are some scammers. I've heard about people getting these strange emails that look like they're from unemployment, but they're not, and it's probably some sort of scam operation to get you interested. And have you heard about any kind of scam contacts from people?
I haven't heard about this particular scam, but I sure have seen a lot of emails that look like scams lately. So I wouldn't rule that out. And I'd always be very suspicious of
No,
anything that comes by email or text or anything where they're asking you to click on anything or contact them through a link that they give you. Go
so
back to the source and do it yourself.
so one thing that I think, in terms of verifying, I mean, I can't say just from what I know whether this is scammer. I know ESD wants people to use the portal as much as possible, and they want to cut down on paperwork, postage, phone calls, all that. So it's possible that this is just a claim, just like banks do this a lot. If you're getting your bank statement in the mail, sometimes you'll get like emails saying, do you want to sign up for online banking? That kind of thing. So that can be legit. In terms of finding out for sure, again, if it's asking you to sign up, it's not saying you must. And if the paper process for this person's working fine, keep doing it. But if you want to check, try the 800 number, and I know it's the pain waiting to get on, but you can maybe talk to somebody in the message to find out if it is or not. But if it's suspicious, be careful. Let's see here. We have another question here. Let's see. This is a person who, another substitute who won a hearing saying that there was no reasonable assurance for last summer. Can we assume, and it was a particular school district that did not have a reopening plan involved. That was a factor. So the judge found that there wasn't reasonable assurance in that particular case. So can we assume and expect that there will be no reasonable assurance this summer? There isn't a rock solid confirmation that schools will be open 100% in September. Let's see, they can say what they want, but it's now a mess at all schools, and it will be a mess in September. If I need UI benefits in July, I will receive a notice of denial and request a hearing. Yes, so again, I think this goes back to the other thing. If you feel you are entitled to benefits, need them, you're unemployed, file the weekly claim. And then if you are denied, you can request the hearing. As far as whether this person could win again or not, I would not venture to predict. But the same thing involved. If you get money, you may have to pay it back. So it's good to maybe put it aside for repayment. So it is untested as far as what the second year of the pandemic will bring. It's impossible to predict how a given judge on a given day will go on this, because there have been other cases this year and the last year where judges have had different opinions about last summer, but we're talking about different employers, different school districts, different situations. So again, if it's worthwhile, a person can go through it. If they're dealing with the hassle. Again, there are months behind processing hearing requests. So it may take months to get a hearing on it. If there is a denial, let's say in July, and you request a hearing in July, your hearing could be in November or January of next year. They have hired more judges, so I don't know if the hearing process will speed up, but the same advice applies in terms of reading the notice and filing a timely request for a hearing and seeing how it will come out. And anything to add to that?
Just as I mentioned before, everything has changed this coming summer, so we can't rely on what happened last year. But last year, the reasonable assurance eligibility test for substitutes who were given the same status that non-professionals got for determining this question was, if the school district was not able to demonstrate, it is highly likely that this employee will have employment in the fall. That would not be reasonable assurance, and people would be eligible for weekly benefits as long as they were able and available to work. So that would not have changed. It's just that the application of that could be different this year. But I think that there still has to be reasonable assurance. It's just a question of how it gets defined.
Yeah. And also too, with the vaccination rates now going up, I think I think that in the next 6 months, next year, there'll be a different environment. And I think that it will be important just for people to monitor the situation. But again, there's also, some people have talked to me in various professions who are, for whatever reason, they don't want to go back to their old job or whatever. And, talking to people individually, people are different, they're in different positions. And after talking to some people a few times, they've really decided to move into a different area, a different field, because a lot of people have skills and they can do remote work, they can do other things. And I think the pandemic has had this a reshuffling effect for some people that even if their former employer does reopen or there's more work or going back, that might not be good and right for them. So some people have chosen to seek a new career path or adjust their work, and that's fine, because I know people make career changes anyway in their lives for many different reasons. But I know some people with pandemic, even with higher vaccination rates or even being vaccinated, are still extremely concerned about being in a work environment with close contact with people. But there are jobs that don't involve close contact with people. I saw an article today that the Biden administration is going to move to make some of the federal remote work permanent in some cases. So that might be a new opportunity for some people who don't feel comfortable returning to in-person work. All right, that's our last question. Thank you, everyone. And again, a reminder, we will not be here. We will be enjoying our Memorial Day holiday next Monday, and we'll return on Monday, June 7th. Thank you very much.
Bye.